Welcome to the American Railroading Podcast, brought to you by the Revolution Rail Group, live from the great state of Texas. Join us as we educate, entertain, and explore the world of American railroading. Here's your host, industry veteran, Don Walsh.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the American Railroading Podcast. I am your host, Don Walsh, President and CEO of the Revolution Rail Group. We are the anchor sponsor for the American Railroading Podcast. We're a consulting and brokering firm in the railcar industry. So if you need any kind of railcar consulting, whether it's process flow analysis, market analysis, anything at all, we can help you with that. We can also help you with the brokering aspect of it. So if you're needing to buy, sell, lease, or sublease railcars, we can help you with that as well. You can reach out to us today at 844-455-3434 or info@therevolutionrailgroup.com. You can also check out our full suite of services on our website at therevolutionrailgroup.com. Well, I cannot believe that it's almost Labor Day weekend already. I'm not sure where the summer went. Well, I felt it here in Houston for sure because it has been a hot one. But the summer is over already. Everybody's kids are back to school. I don't have any of those, but my dog, is back in doggy daycare. I guess that counts. But anyway, it's been a great summer. Hopefully you all had a great time. And we're getting back to fall temperatures here soon. I know we here in Houston are definitely looking forward to that. Unfortunately, we have some bad news to share as well, some sad news. We want to share that my friend and mentor of almost my entire life, literally from the time I was 13 years old, Joe Schieszler Sr., has passed away. If you remember episode, I can't remember what number it was, but November of last year, I had Joe Schieszler Sr. on, a founder of Rescar Companies and AllTranstek, for our Difference Makers episode. And if you haven't heard it, please go back and listen to it. It really gives a deep dive into a man that had a huge impact on our industry, as well as my life and others, including our guest for today. So, again, our condolences to the Schieszler family and all friends as well. Anyone that knew Joe knows what a great loss this is. And our episode today is in memory of him. So please keep the Schieszler family in your thoughts and prayers. Well, thanks to all of you, we continue to remain in the top 10% of all podcasts globally. That still blows my mind, is an absolute blessing. So thank you all for your continued downloads and shares and views as well. We've been downloaded now in 44 countries. Producer John, we're up to 44, with the newest being Moldova. Now, thank you to our friends in Moldova. I did have to look you up, though. I'm not going to lie. It's a great little spot. I'm going to visit sometime, actually, just because they listened to our episode. But U.S. is still the number one downloads. Canada is still number 2. Australia is still number 3. But we've got France, New Zealand, and Brazil hot on their heels for third place. So thank you to our friends in France, New Zealand, and Brazil. Also, our friends, give a shout out to you in the Maldives and Sweden. So thank you all. Please continue to download, continue to share and subscribe and leave a review. The reviews are very important to the podcast. So when you leave a review, whether it's on our website at americanrailroading.net or whether it's on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Spotify, Apple, what have you, it really helps us get further out into the interwebs, as they say, because it boosts our algorithms. So please give us a review, especially a 5-star review if you love what we do. We would really appreciate that. And also, if you like what you heard on the podcast, you can buy us a cup of coffee. So what do I mean by that? So you can go to our website at americanrailroading.net. You'll see a little yellow coffee cup in the bottom left-hand corner. You can click on that. You can buy us 1 cup, 3 cups, 5 cups, or as many cups as you would like of coffee. And it's like leaving us a tip for doing a good job. So if you like what you've heard, like what you've seen on the videos, please help us out with our endeavors by buying us a cup of coffee. So thank you to all those of you that have and those of you that will. Don't forget we have a YouTube channel as well. So if you like to watch the videos versus the audio, you can watch our videos either on our website, americanrailroading.net, and just click on the videos tab, or go to YouTube at American Railroading Podcast. That's YouTube at American Railroading Podcast. Please be sure to check out our online store as well. Guys, I'm so excited about the online store that we created this year. It is really, really neat. If you haven't looked at it yet, please check it out. You can either go through, actually the best way to go to it is to go through, again, our website, americanrailroading.net, and click on the store tab. We have lots of items in there, hats and shirts and hoodies, especially with the fall temperatures coming. You're going to definitely want to check that out and represent American Railroading. But also the challenge coins. So as a reminder, the challenge coins were created specifically designed by me and some friends in Dallas to support the troops in the railroading industry and to give them their recognition. And so a portion of the sales for the sales of challenge coins this year is going to go toward Boots for Troops. And Boots for Troops is an organization in full transparency that I am a chairman for with our welcome committee. And we provide care packages to our troops all over the world. We also do spouse scholarships for those that are enlisted. We help with scholarships for their spouses. We also do tuition scholarships, and travel reimbursements. So we help with lots of different things. And so check out the store at AmericanRailroading.net at your earliest convenience. And I would love for you to buy some challenge coins as well. We are continuing to accept sponsorships for our podcast. We only have one gold sponsorship left. So we also have several silver sponsorships left. So if you're interested in becoming a podcast sponsor, please don't delay because time is running out and spots are running out. You can reach out to us today at marketing@AmericanRailroading.net. Again, that's marketing@AmericanRailroading.net. And let us know that you're interested and we'll take it from there. Love to have you on board. And again, we have our platinum sponsor who we'd like to tell you about, and that is the Alden Company. Founded in 1904, Alden has been an industry leader, charting a steady course in the manufacturing and distribution of a wide variety of railroad safety and track repair tools and more. The Alden website boasts over 800 catalog items to choose from, with categories including track maintenance and repair, derailers and railers, signs and lights, wheel chocks and stops, rail cars and locomotives, and even truck docks. Alden provides outstanding customer service with a wide variety of solutions, and when you call them, you will always get a real person to talk to, not an automated service. While based in the Chicagoland area, the Alden name is known internationally, and with over 120 years in the rail industry, they're a company you can count on. Please reach out to our friends at Alden today at 847-623-8800 or e-rail@aldenco.com. You can also review all of their products and resources on their website at www.aldenco.com. Alden, keeping things on track since 1904. So if you haven't heard on the last episode, we have again partnered up this year with our friends at Boots for Troops for our recognizing a U.S. Armed Forces veteran in the railroad industry with a Honor Our Heroes gift package. So we started receiving nominations already. Thank you for that, for those of you that have sent them in. And if you'd like to nominate someone, you can simply email Boots for Troops at info@boots4troops.com. Again, that's info@boots4troops.com. Be sure to put in the subject line, the American Railroading Podcast Honor Our Heroes nominee, and you'll need to include some information. So it'll be the nominee's name. We're going to need that for sure. Their contact information, the branch of military they served in, their rank, their final rank, years served, medals and awards, and the related job, the company and the company they worked for or retired from. So let me clarify that one more time. If you didn't listen last month, they don't have to work for a railroad. It just has to be a rail-related job. So you could be a fleet manager somewhere. You could be a repair person in a rail car repair shop. You can do anything related to rail. You could be a parts supplier for rail. It's still a rail-related job, so you qualify. Anyway, and then finish up by telling us why you feel this person should be nominated, why they should win the award. And I love reading those paragraphs. I really, really do. That's my favorite part of the submissions. They were last year as well. So please don't hesitate because the deadline for nominations is Friday the 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th. We are not superstitious here. So it'll be Friday, September 13th. And then we'll be announcing the winner during the September podcast episode as well. So please get those nominations in. So today we're going to dive into an overview of the paint and lining process for rail cars, which I think its importance is often understated. Our guest today is a longtime friend of mine. I won't say how long, Tim. It's been a long time, but a longtime friend of mine with 43 years of experience in linings and coatings. And our guest for today is Tim Schaffer. Tim is Regional Sales Manager for PPG Industries out of Du Bois, Pennsylvania. I always wanted to pronounce it Dubois, but it is Du Bois, Pennsylvania. Tim began his career in the railcar industry, as I said, 43 years ago with Rescar Industries, where I also started my career, again, founded by Joe Schieszler Sr. He worked his way up through the ranks of railcar repair and maintenance, including blasting and painting appropriately, and he's held various positions of leadership, including plant manager. Tim then went on to pursue a career focused on railcar coatings and linings, including positions with Carboline as a technical sales rep, AllTranstek as senior consultant for coatings and linings, Watco as director of coating and lining processes, GBW Railcar Services as VP of coatings, International Paint as North American Key Account Manager for Rail, and now PPG Industries, where he is Regional Sales Manager. Tim lives in DuBois, Pennsylvania with his family and enjoys spending time with his family and friends, golfing, and watching the Las Vegas Raiders games and listening to Bob Seger. I mean, who wouldn't love that? And with that, I say welcome to the American Railroading Podcast, Tim.
Good afternoon, Don. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And you would never guess that you were a Raiders fan with that Howie Long jersey hanging above your head there.
Of course, yeah.
And now, what is the other jersey I'm seeing there?
Derek Carr.
Oh, very good. Very good. Well, very cool. Well, thank you for joining us today, Tim. And as we're dedicating this episode to the memory of Joe Schieszler Sr., founder of Rescar Industries and AllTranstek, we both got our start there, as I said. And I was just wondering if you had any Joe Sr. stories or anything you'd like to share, any memories, anything like that?
Story-wise, I'm not sure about that, but Joe Sr. was probably one of the best motivators that I've ever been around. He could really motivate people to do what was needed to be done. So yeah, great guy, great family, and certainly we sadly missed, that's for sure. For sure.
And what got you interested in the railcar industry in the first place?
Well, I went to school, my high school years, I went to school for auto body. So I was into the painting, that aspect. And then, as you know, my brother worked at Rescar. So I worked a little bit after I graduated at a body shop, and then Rescar was hiring, so I went there, and here we are.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history, that's right.
Well, thank God for that. You've been an absolute asset to our industry, so thank goodness you found it. And what made you decide on focusing on paint and lining? Because obviously you did other things before that.
Yeah, I think that's just, really what I enjoy. Even, when I was plant manager and other roles, I always stayed involved on the coating side of the business. So it's just, for whatever reason, been a natural fit for me.
Well, and when I first entered the industry, and this will probably make you laugh because I'm sure you have some stories too, but hazing new employees was a thing.
Oh, my.
And
yes.
And so one of the things, it would be silly things. It wouldn't be mean things or harmful things, but like telling an employee to go find the flux capacitor in the basement, and they're running around looking for the basement door and we didn't have a basement. So, and then they couldn't find a flux capacitor because there is no such thing. And then we'd yell at them about how stupid they were because they couldn't find anything. So with me, one of my first hazings done to me was in the blast and paint area. And blasting is hard work, as you know, and we'll get into that in a little bit here. But I had no idea how to even hold the hose, how much pressure was going to come out of that thing, and they didn't warn me of anything. They're just like, lean it up against your body and pull the trigger. I'm like, okay. So I did, landed up on my ass, and that was fun. But it broke the ice with everybody. I earned my stripes, so to speak. But did you end up going through anything like that when you came into the industry?
Oh, there's always some of that naturally. And of course, it's all for fun, as you said. So, yeah. Plenty of stories. We all went through it. We all did it, but all for the right fun,
Oh, for sure. And I've got more if anybody gets bored and wants to hear some of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, let's get into the coatings and linings portion first. So, what is the purpose of a railcar exterior coating?
Well, the main purpose really is to protect the asset itself, So there's a lot that goes into it with, depending on what may be transported in the car, is selecting which coating is used. Some of it's, the car owner preference as well, but it's really just to protect the asset from corrosion.
Yeah, and it, like you said, depends on the commodity as well for the exterior, because I know that some cars have additional, skid, that's the word I'm looking for, coatings on the exterior. Also, there's a stripe, if you want to call it, painted around the band of like a tank car.
Center band?
Yeah, in case commodity ends up spilling, God forbid. So there's all kinds of things like that. But in other words, it's just to protect the asset.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And the railcar interior. Now, I know there's several reasons for the linings to be applied. So what is the difference of product purity versus corrosion protection? And can it be both?
It can be both. Product purity, you're basically protecting the commodities being transported from any contamination from the bare steel itself. And then as far as, from a corrosion protection standpoint, you're protecting the tank car from being corroded by the commodity. So that's basically the two differences in those two aspects.
Okay. And how many different types, and this may be a long answer, and feel free to take as long as you want to with this one, but how many different types of exterior coatings are there? Like direct to metal, waterborne, overcoats, plural components. I mean, there's a lot, right?
Yeah, you touched on them right there for sure. You've got your water-based, your DTAM epoxies, your two-coat epoxy urethanes. Some people even go with like an epoxy and a polysiloxane top coat, which is probably a little bit overkill, but some people do that. So, yeah, there's just a whole host. And as you mentioned earlier, the tank cars with the center bands, maybe there's an acid in that car, so the center band's there for a little extra protection in the spillage area.
Yeah, and I actually have a funny story about direct to metal. So there, I won't say who it was because he probably listens to the podcast. Hopefully he'll get a good laugh out of this. I know we did at the time. But it was a direct to metal paint that we were looking to apply, and we were getting our first electrostatic paint gun. And so for anybody that's not familiar with electrostatic paint guns, they're actually pretty cool, and they've been around a while now. But we'd never seen one before, so this was a big deal for us. And I want to say the vendor was a Dove that came out and was giving us a class, and they did a wonderful job. And so you actually have to ground this paint gun to the car, and it sucks all the overspray and everything to the car. It's really kind of a neat process if you've never seen it before. It's different, though, so you got to become familiar with how it works, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And the first thing the instructor says is, whatever you do, don't put your hand between the spray nozzle and the car, because you will become the ground. And I almost said his name, but the painter says, yep, got it. And then the trainer ran them through some passes and that, and they left, and we were getting ready to spray the car, and it clogged a little. The nozzle clogged a little bit on the paint gun. First thing he does is stick his hand in front of it, pulls the trigger, and I mean, it was like the dude got tased. It was great. He just, he wasn't writhing in pain or anything, so I probably shouldn't laugh. But he did drop to the ground. But that was the last time he stuck his hand in front of a paint gun. So for those of you,
I'm sure you felt that and remembered it.
I would think so. So for those of you using an electrostatic paint gun, do not stick any body part in front of it, please. You will be the ground. So same question now on interior linings. I imagine there's lots and lots of variations of interior linings. Can you give us some examples of the spectrum of linings that are out there?
Yeah, and again, this is really dependent on what type of commodities are being transported in the car, but you have, multi-coat epoxies, single-coat epoxies, whether they're high solids or solvent-free versions, which requires special equipment to apply them. You have baked phenolics that go in certain cars, like acid cars and things like that. And then, of course, there are the, like hydrochloric acids and other tank cars that are lined with rubber. So there's a host of options for sure.
And processes and equipment, like you said. Rubber linings for one are one I've never messed with. I've dealt with a lot of things, but never rubber lining. I just know that if one ended up in one of our shops, we politely found a shop that could take it and we sent it back out, because you have to be skilled to do, trained and skilled to do all of these things. But rubber lining was just different. But yeah, there are shops that do specialize in that for sure. So how is the correct exterior paint or lining type chosen? So I guess maybe I'll go to lining type, because that seems to be more of something that has a lot of research done to determine. So how is it determined what lining to put into a rail car?
Well, there's a lot of testing that's done, with certain commodities to where, they do immersion testing in the lab. And maybe they run that test for 6 months. They may check it every 30 days or so just to see how the panels are performing in that test. Some of them may fail pretty quickly. Some may go the entire 6 months with no failure whatsoever. So a lot of immersion testing is the main type of testing. to see what's compatible. And then you can use, oftentimes, one commodity you can cross over to other similar commodities to know that that same lining would be suitable for, other products that are very similar as well.
So if a car owner is sending a car into the shop and the shop says, hey, maybe the change of service. We'll start there. The change of service going from one commodity to another. Can they call someone like yourself at PPG and you could help them based on the commodity, or do you not get involved in things of that nature?
We do get involved, and most of the time what we need is like an SDS of the commodity that's going to be transported. We'd like to know what the last contents of the car was, so we know that depending on what it is, maybe there's a decontamination step that might be required as part of relining the car. We also like to know the loading and unloading temperatures, so we know of what the new commodity is going to be, so we know what the expectation is. Some linings will hold up to certain temperatures and others won't. So those are the variables that we look for in determining what recommendations we can make as far as a suitable coating.
Very good. And of course, whether it's coiled or non-coiled, I would imagine that makes a difference sometimes too.
That is another variable as well, yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because I've seen it go bad sometimes when they put the wrong line. When somebody applies the wrong line to a car with coils in it, it basically So for people that don't know, I don't want to talk over your heads. Coils, there's certain types of tank cars that have coils on the interior and coils on the exterior, depending on the type of commodity it's going to be shipped. And those cars are designed for that. But for those of you that remember, ever been in an old farmhouse or something, or old business with the steam radiator heaters, that's essentially the same process, right? So you can imagine that if somebody overheats a steam coil, it could bake that lining pretty good. And then we're replacing it all over again, which is great for the shop, not so great for the customers. But before we can paint or line a car, we need to prep it, right? And including blasting, of course, is part of the prep. So I couldn't believe how many different types of blast media there are that is used to, so blast media, for those of you who don't know, is what's the material is that's used to blast the lining or paint out of the car, off the car. That could be river sand, believe it or not, it could be river sand, crushed walnut, steel shot, 50-50 blend, even sponge blast, which is kind of neat. Sponge blast is kind of fun, and I know I've used that in the past as well. And yes, it really is sponges. We can get into that another time, but that's a pretty neat process. So why are there so many options blast media, and what is the purpose kind of behind all the variations?
Well, I think it depends on the capability of each shop or facility that's doing the work. Probably the majority of the abrasive that is used is steel grit, which could be a blend of different sizes, maybe LG40, LG50, maybe a 50-50 blend, maybe 60-40. It just depends on, a lot of what type of coatings you typically remove from the interior exterior of the car. But that is the predominant abrasive that is used. And the thing about it, it can be recycled. So you can get multiple uses out of it before it basically needs to be thrown away and replenished. There are some that still use some version of sand or Black Beauty or other products like that. But as I said, predominantly steel grit is most widely used in the industry for sure.
And to your point, something like river sand is a one use and done. And that we can get into all that another time too. We can talk about this stuff for hours, my friends. So we're going to have more episodes to come. Trust me, we will. But a blast profile is something that people talk about, especially when it comes to an interior lining, and it's necessary, right? And there's different types of blast profile. So can you just touch on what a blast profile is and what would determine what type of blast profile a lining would need?
Yeah, so a blast profile is basically when you use the abrasive to remove the coating that was there, or even on a new car, you're basically roughening the steel to give the coating a mechanical bond to stick to. Typically, you'd like that profile to be about 25% of the thickness of the coating, although usually you top that off at about 4 mil blast profile. And that would really only be necessary for a coating that's, 30 to 35 mils thick. On the normal coatings that we use in rail, you might want to profile anywhere from the 2.5 mil range up to maybe 4 as a maximum. And it's really just to roughen the surface so the coating has a mechanical bond to stick to.
Very good. So yeah, and if you've ever worked on a car, like my dad and I, when I was a kid, we would do all kinds of repairs to hot rods. Sometimes you have to put a little Bondo or something on there. You got to roughen that surface up. You can't just leave it that way, or the paint will not adhere. Right? I do not envy railcar blasters at all. As I said earlier, jokingly, that was one of the first positions I was put in when I was learning the railcar repair trade. It's hot with your gear on. You can hardly see anything because of all the dust and that from the blasting process, and you're always being told, and I laugh at this because I can think of it like it was yesterday, but you're always being told your department's the bottleneck. Blast is always told you're slowing things down, pick things up, right? And anybody listening to me that's ever done that is laughing right now and shaking your head yes, because you know that's true. How important is having the proper blast booth with proper lighting, an auger and belt system, as you said, for recovery of the media? How important is all that, along with proper ventilation, for a good blast job?
Yeah, I mean, that's very important, both from a functionality standpoint, safety standpoint, for sure. If you're blasting the exterior of the car, you need good lighting to see, all the different angles you've got to blast. You got to watch, so obviously you can traipse around in the booth itself and not trip over things like that. So good lighting on the exterior part is very important. On the inside of a car, it's even more important because it is very, very difficult to see in there. You've got 100 pounds of pressure at the nozzle, and you've got a lot of grit coming out of that nozzle to blast off the coating. So you've got the dust from the grit, you've got the coating being fractured, it's getting dusty as well. So certainly it's very difficult to see in there. It's a tough environment to work in, no doubt about it.
It sure is. And can blasting be done properly without a booth?
Yeah, as far as the interior of a car, you're like, especially a tank car, you're blasting inside the car. So you can do it there, but you still need an auger system to get the grit out of the car. And then especially if you're using grit, you want to recapture that, recycle it, and reuse it. So you definitely need a means of an auger underneath the car. So most people pretty much use booths these days, that's for sure.
Yeah. And personal protective equipment, or PPE as we call it, is a must. And I'm telling folks now that maybe you're getting into a railcar repair facility or anywhere where they're painting pretty much anything, when you go to put your gear on, shake it out first. And
yes.
And I say that because no matter where you live in the U.S. or anywhere, where you're listening to us, you're leaving your stuff hanging in a shop all night long, and critters do crawl in there. I actually had an employee, and it was the same poor guy. I just thought of that. It's the same poor guy that zapped himself with the electrostatic paint gun. He did not shake his hood out one night and didn't shake it out after being left overnight, and put it on, and there was a brown recluse spider in the hood that bit him on the face.
Little surprise there.
And he ended up having to go to the emergency room immediately. Yeah, and that is no joke. I mean, these shops are in the middle of the country sometimes, and we're surrounded by woods and whatever. So whether it's ticks or whatever, man, shake your gear out before you put it on to do your job.
Yeah, not only the insects, but also, sometimes the grit will stick up in there as well. And if you don't shake that and get all the grit out of it, if you could get some in your eye, and then that leads to another challenge as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. Proper air pressure matters, and you mentioned this earlier. So I was actually, for those of you that remember, I went to work for a GE for many years after I was in the shops for many years before that. And I was always brought into these conference calls because I was one of the few people in the corporate office that had experience as a shop manager, and specifically with tank cars. And so I got brought into a conference call one day because we were helping lessees get their cars through shop. As you can imagine, there were some delays from time to time and projects that were slowed down. And so they brought me into a call, and the pricing for the blasting was astronomical, and the time that it was taking was astronomical. So they brought me into the call, and the first thing I asked the shop manager and his paint and blast manager was, what pressure are you running at the nozzle? And they got really quiet because they didn't expect a question like that from somebody at a railcar lessor. And they didn't say anything at first. I said, okay, let me ask you this. What blast media are you using? They said, river sand. I said, okay. And now what pressure you ring at the nozzle? And they said, like 75 PSI. I said, oh, okay, great. Well, you might as well be throwing the river sand at the car. So load up all my cars, put them on outbound, and I'll be giving you disposition to where to send them this afternoon. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk. It's just simply if you don't have the right equipment, and you don't have the right, blast meter or whatever, because the process just was broken and the equipment wasn't proper for what we needed. And that's why I was saying earlier, it is so important to make sure you have this stuff lined up, because otherwise it's the car owner, the lessor, or the lessee that's going to end up having to pay the price for that. And sooner or later, they will end up going somewhere else. So, but yeah, and they didn't like me very much after that conversation. But what I did say was, when you get things right and you get the proper air compressor and things like that, give us a call back. We'd love to give you another chance. So I was fair with it, I think. So having said that, how important is it to have the proper equipment, not only the air compressor, but inline filters, right, to keep moisture out and things of that nature? Is that something that is really pretty vital to the process as well?
Oh, absolutely. Not only the pressure, just back to the pressure part, probably 90 PSI at the nozzle is probably the minimum you'd want to be at. Anything above that, you're just that much more productive. But as far as the filters, you definitely want to have good filtered air. You don't want any moisture in that air, because especially in the environment, you've got steel grit in there. You get any moisture in it, it starts to gobble up itself and can jam up in your auger or in your elevator when it's going to dump up into the blast box for reuse. So, yeah, absolutely. Good, clean, abrasive, and good, clean air is key parts of that process.
And you mentioned the augers, and I just thought about this too, is put in pits with sump pumps. Make sure you put in pits with sump pumps. That's a good idea, yes. Because I was only ever at one shop that didn't have them, and when it rains, man, I'll tell you what, you want those sump pumps to keep water out of there. So something to think about. Well, I'd like to take just a moment here and recognize our gold sponsor, EnviroServe. EnviroServe is America's premier provider of comprehensive, reliable, effective, and eco-friendly environmental solutions for the rail industry. Their rail services include mobile railcar cleaning, flaring, interior blasting and transloading, removal and replacement of tank car service equipment, and leak testing. Complete HAZ and non-HAZ waste handling, management, remediation, and disposal services, 24/7 emergency spill response, and more. To learn more, please visit their website at www.enviroserve.com. So what other types of surface prep are there, especially with interior linings?
Interior linings, if you are relining a car, you're basically going to blast out the lining that's in there. So it's pretty much abrasive blasting. If you're doing a touch-up, then you can get away with, depending on the extent of the repair, you may use something like a vacuum blaster that is a very small headed attachment and blasts a really, really small area, and it sucks the abrasives back up so it's not so dusty in the car. You could also use a bristle blaster, which would remind the average person of a wire wheel, but the wire is bent at a 90-degree angle, and it actually does leave a profile on the substrate, where if you used a regular grinding wheel or a wire wheel, it would be a very smooth substrate. So you would have a lack of adhesion if you used that type of equipment.
And that was actually my next question, is why is surface preparation so important? So it comes down to lack of adhesion?
Yes. There's for any listener that knows NACE, which is now AMP, there's been NACE studies throughout the years where pretty much 85% of all coating failures is deemed to be surface preparation related. So very important part of the process. Yeah. You can have the best coating you have, and if the surface isn't prepared properly, it still won't work as it's intended.
Well, and that's kind of why I asked earlier about being able to blast outside of a booth, because atmosphere is so important. The humidity could cause a problem with surface prep. This is what blew my mind when I was learning, coming up through the shops and stuff, is if you're sweating, of course you're going to sweat. I mean, you're inside of a hot rail car in the summertime. But if you drop beads of sweat on that surface and don't do something to remediate it, that could cause a lining to pop. You put your handprint. I've heard of actually seeing handprints inside of rail cars where the lining let go eventually, and you could see that it was basically in the shape of a handprint. So anything like that could really cause the lining to fail. Am I right?
Yeah, anything that would be considered a surface contaminant. So any type of surface contaminant is in between the coating and its bond to the steel. So yeah, you definitely need to avoid that. However, you need to.
Yeah, for sure. And so moving on to applying the paint and lining again. We've talked about having proper equipment, good lighting, ventilation, compressors, inline filters, things like that. And I really want to encourage, I know I've been to enough shops as you have. A lot of the shops that we go to have been around forever. You know, since who knows, World War I, World War II. Our last episode, we talked about that, about how long our industry's been around, how long our shops have been around. And I know that capital expenditure is a big deal. And I know that it's difficult to cut loose spending at times, but we're talking about finished product right here in the linings. And we talked about product purity. We talked about corrosion prevention. So this is very important. So I just want to encourage those that have the ability to determine where spending goes at some of these facilities to really take a hard look at the equipment in those blast booths, paint booths, because it is way more vital than I think anyone understands that hasn't done the job, number one. Lighting, especially. I mean, some of these booths are like dungeons. You can't see anything. When you're blasting, you can't see through the dust. I mean, look, I've done it. You've done it. It is challenging, but yet it also shows on the finished product as well, I think. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but I do think that's a place in the process that definitely needs to be paid attention to when CapEx budgets are being determined. Many coatings have to be mixed together with a very specific amount of each component, right? And how important is it to get that mixture correct, and what can happen if they don't?
Yeah, there are some single component materials we use for either exteriors or interior linings, but most of them are a mixed ratio. Oftentimes they're, even ratios of 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, or 4-to-1. Every now and then you do get the oddball mixed ratio 7.8-to-1. So I'm sure depending on the coating type, there's a little bit of leeway there as to, are they needing to be exactly 1-to-1 or 4-to-1? There might be a 5 to 10% allowance there, but for the most part, the best practice is if you're going to mix a partial kit, you want to measure out each component proportionally. Use a measuring cup or a graduated container or things like that to make sure you get your right mix ratio of 1-to-1, 4-to-1, whatever it is, and then mix the two components together, and then you can do your touch up or whatever you're going to do.
And we talked about automobile painting earlier a little bit. And I know in automobile painting, there's things like hardeners and things that you can add to speed up the process. Is that the same type of thing with railcar linings and coatings, or is it different?
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same. That's what I was referring to as far as the mix ratio. So if you're at a 1-to-1 mix ratio, that's one part A, which is typically the resin. Sometimes, depending on the coating, that could be the hardener as well. And then the part B is typically the hardener. But again, on some coatings, it is reverse technology, as we call it in the industry. So yes, you're typically adding one part of resin and one part of hardener. That's the proper mix ratio. Typically, you would mix them separately, then combine them, and then mix them together. And then you have the right proportion ready to go do the work you're going to do.
Okay. And applying paint or lining in a rail car is not quite the same as with an automobile, although most auto painters I've seen that come into railcar paint jobs do a really, really good job. They're usually very finicky, which you need to be, and very accurate with their application. With that said, the thickness or millage that you mentioned a little earlier as well of an interior lining as an example, or exterior even, is very important. Can you explain why the millage or thickness of the coating is so important?
Yeah, and a lot of it depends on the coating type. For instance, we may do 4 to 8 mils on a DTM epoxy on the exterior of a coating. A lot of people think that more is better. More is not always better. It certainly depends on the type of coating. If you have a water-based coating and you apply 8 to 10 mils of that, it's going to take a long time for it to dry. You trap water underneath very top layer of the coating will tend to dry, but it'll be soft underneath, so you've trapped some water in there. Same goes for a solvent-based system. If the tops of the surface coating dries, you may trap some solvent in there. So more is not always better. Certainly applying the material at the specified or recommended film thickness is the best bet.
And I would always, so to give people an idea, you haven't seen a rail car that's been oversprayed or over applied. It doesn't just have runs, it has sags. So I'd walk into the booth when I was doing inspections of, final coatings and say, oh, Betty Crocker was here, because that's what it looks like, is a Betty Crocker cake with the frosting running. It's man, don't do it. Follow the instructions and don't over apply. And it's difficult, right? It's difficult sometimes, especially inside of a rail car, let's say a hopper car with all the slope sheets and stuff and a center sill, right? Because you're having to apply not only a specific thickness, but there is a variance that you're allowed, which is in some cases with our friends at GE many years ago, for instance, it was a 2 mil variation. So the variation's very small. So you've got to be right on, and you're standing. I don't know how I can explain this to people. How can I explain this? What would you be standing in? Well, I don't know, man, but it's a confined space. So you're standing in an area where the gun and the center sill and the slope sheets, as you're going around in the circle spraying this, physically turning in a circle, one is maybe 12 inches away from you, one surface. And as you turn, that center sill comes up and that's 6 inches away from you. And you keep turning, and that continues to change. The distance of what you're spraying continues to change, yet the millage only has a 2 mil variance. That's hard. And so, again, I guess I'm just giving just desserts to our friends that are doing these jobs, because it's hard, it's difficult. And so clearly training is vital and to the success of the blasting, the painting, the lining processes. So do manufacturers like yourselves of the coatings and the linings, do you offer training of such things?
Yes, we do. We'll develop training programs specifically for a company or maybe even one of their individual locations. If maybe they have a common problem that they've been dealing with and just not able to correct. Sometimes we'll take a training program that we already have and just really hone in on a particular part of the process and go in and work with them to help them. Typically when somebody's applying one of our materials for the first time, we'll have a tech service person on site to help them get started right, make sure they mix it correctly, make sure they understand how to apply it correctly, things like that. But so with a combination of tech service and training, we are definitely provide those services to our customers for sure.
Well, and I know there's community colleges out there as well that offer something really cool, which is a virtual paint booth. I have not been in one. I have not seen one. Have you seen one of those?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah. What is that like? I imagine that's pretty neat.
It is pretty neat. You put that headset on and then you're trying to spray, they project an image in front of you, whether it's a steel beam or whatever the case may be. And you're trying to spray that beam or object and trying to hit all of the angles that are in front of you and make sure you get the right thickness and the right overlap of your passes. So it certainly gives you at least a feel for how good your technique is.
Well, mine wouldn't be all that great right now. So I'd much rather try it inside of a virtual experience where I'm not having to pay $4,000 or $5,000, or in some cases now I'm hearing 30 or something to have to blast and reline a car. So I will go with virtual all day. Specific to tank cars, I'm sorry, not just tank cars, but really any rail car. What would the life expectancy typically be for an exterior paint or interior lining?
Yeah, that's going to depend on a couple factors. What type of coating you're talking about, the service environment that it's in, especially on the interiors of the, hopper cars are a little bit less of an issue than tank cars for sure. Some tank cars are very corrosive, very aggressive type commodities. Molten sulfur, for instance, you're probably lucky if you get 3 to 5 years out of the lining. Caustic soda or others, 10 years, somewhere around there. So it really depends on the pairing of the coating and the commodity that's being transported in the car. On the exterior, there again, it depends on the coating type. Obviously, the quality of the application that's done, the film thickness that was specified, and how close the application was to that specified thickness. So there's certainly some variables, but it just really you have to take those factors into account to really be able to determine.
Well, and there's specific periodic lining inspections that are required, especially with tank cars. Who determines the inspection intervals, let's say with a tank car, and how is that determination made? Is there a process there?
There is a process, and typically that's determined by the lining owner, which may not always be the car owner. Sometimes the shipper, as an example, may own the lining in the car, where the owner of the car does not get involved in that process. Typically, the lining owner works with the coating manufacturers and says, hey, here's our commodity, here's the variables, the loading, unloading temperature, and we work with them. And we also look at the data that they've captured when cars are shopped, and they do get a lining inspection. They look at the data as to how that report looks. Is it, good to go as is? Does it need a little bit of touch up, or does it need to be relined completely? So the lining owner is responsible for generating the coating inspection interval based on the data they capture, which I think the maximum interval is 8 years, I believe. I hope I'm not misstating that. But the data that they capture will either allow them to go through the 8-year cycle or maybe shorten that cycle.
Yeah, and I think they can ask for an extension if need be with the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, but they have to submit testing that supports that. I think the maximum they can go on that is 2 years, I think. Again, I'm not positive myself, but I think that's correct.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, and then they also have to mark this on the side of the car, right, when the lining inspection due date is, and then also they have to record that within our UMLR system that we talk about sometimes I hear on the show. And so this is a big deal. And this is one of the many requirements to make sure that the cars are suitable for interchange, suitable for use. And so make sure you have your lining inspection dates. Those of you that are out there, your car owners and your lining owners. What would an average lining inspection look like? Is it specifically visual and that's it? Or are there other steps in the process?
Most of the time it is just a visual inspection, just going through the car itself and looking to see if there are any failure in the car. And again, the lining owner will provide their acceptance criteria as to what you should look for when you're doing that inspection. And again, this is mainly in a tank car because that's what's required. So if we stick with that, they provide their acceptance criteria. Somebody goes in and does a visual inspection. I guess we would call it an enhanced visual inspection, which is just good lighting in the car. And then you just look at the lining. If you see some failures, you may take some film thickness readings. Maybe you see some rust coming through the lining. That might be indicative of maybe low film thickness in the car. But typically it is mainly restricted to just a visual inspection and then noting on some type of form of what the condition of the interior coating is in the car.
I remember when I was, again, starting out in the shops, and this was for lining application, I would be sent in there with what they call a holiday tester, which was simply like a wand that was grounded. It's got power to it, right? If I remember right, it was grounded, and then there was a sponge on the end of it, a wet sponge, and he would literally wipe it around in the car for it to beep if there was a low area that you needed to work on. I'm guessing that was sensing bare metal or something like that.
Yeah, it would sense a void in the coating, whether it's maybe related to low film thickness or just a pinhole in the coating, or whatever the case may be. That's typically used when you newly apply a new coating. It's not a good idea to use a holiday tester in an in-service coating. But yeah, definitely part of the process for a newly applied interior coating.
And a question I often get, and I think it's because of the need to control the atmosphere that you're working in when you're prepping a car for lining and coatings. But the question I often get is, can interior linings be touched up, whether it's hopper cars, tank cars, whatever? Can it be touched up via a mobile crew in the field? Is that possible?
It is possible. The key variable there is that the surface prep is done properly. So again, depending on the extent of failure, that may dictate what type of surface prep they do, what type of equipment they use. The other key to that is, obviously getting the surface prepared, making sure that area of failure has been roughened sufficiently to accept the new coating. But then typically one of the things that's sometimes missed when they do touch up, whether it's in the field or even in the shop, is you like to leave a border around where the touch-up patch is going to be that's been abraded, but you don't recoat that area. You don't want to get any new coating up onto the old coating because it won't adhere and it could then get into the product and maybe contaminate a load of product. So you want to leave that 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch abraded border around your patch so you don't have an adhesion issue to worry about.
And speaking of the actual paint and lining itself, like the actual what's delivered to you in inventory, I'm guessing there's a lifespan on that stuff, I would assume. And that's always a risk, right? When you're doing a big project and you order a bunch of stuff and maybe the project gets shortened by a few cars, or God forbid, the project gets deleted altogether for one reason or another. What is the average shelf life on paint and lining material that's in shop inventory?
It depends on the coating type. You know, some epoxies may be 3 years, 2 years, whatever the case may be. One thing to remember for the folks out there is when you do have those multi-component materials, the part A and the part B could have different shelf lives. They're not always the same. And sometimes it's the part A at 3 years and the part B at 2, or it could be the reverse of that. So what you have to do is each coating manufacturer puts a batch number label on their cans, and some put a manufacturer date and the expiration date so it's readily visible as to when that coating expires. Others that don't do that, you basically have to decode their batch number to know when it was made, look at their shelf life list to know how long the life of the coating is, and then determine when it expires. So there's a little bit to that process. It just depends on what labels are on the cans.
And if it is expired, what is the proper way of disposing of it? I'm assuming you can't just throw it in the trash.
No, you cannot. So sometimes, even if it's expired, if it's maybe not expired too long, you may be able to get that batch extended and may still be a usable coating. So what you typically would do is call your coating manufacturer representative, give them the batch numbers, they provide that to their lab, and somebody will pull the retains for that particular batch, and they'll check it, and they'll say, yeah, it's good, or no, it's not good, or maybe you can extend it by 6 more months, or whatever the case may be. But anyways, whenever it is expired, you basically have to dispose that as waste in your waste drums. You know, most people have waste streams at their shops, so you typically would have a drum that you would dump the waste material into. Just like if you have any material left from when you're spraying a car, maybe you have a gallon left in the bucket, you're going to dump that into your waste drum so you can dispose of it properly.
And this is just a thought for those shop managers out there. And I know in the past, shops have taken paint that couldn't be used in a rail car anymore, but it could be used for stuff around the shop itself. I've seen them take paint and paint the inside of the shop, brighten it up a little bit, you know, so there may be ways to repurpose it as well, so you're not having to dispose of it so much. And I say that because it costs money to dispose of things, and that's why people tend to let inventory sit, but please don't do that. You can find other ways to utilize it, I'm sure. If you can, I tell you what, painting the inside of a shop makes such a difference to the people that are in there. You know, it doesn't look as dark and dingy, and it shows that you're putting in an effort. And it also shows to people like myself as a consultant that come in and now inspect railcar facilities of all different types. Customers, the quality that you have inside of your shop is what customers think they're getting on their railcar on the way out of the shop. So that's just something to think about. So what would you say is the number one mistake shops make in the paint or lining process?
Cool. That's a loaded question.
We got plenty of time, my friend.
Yeah, I think surface prep is really key to the process. Something as simple as mixing the coating. You know, again, if they're multi-components, you want to mix them separately, then combine them, and then mix them again so that they're, you got a good mixture of the A and the B. Some coatings require a sweat-in time, which means you mix the A and B separately, you put them together, you mix them up, and then you may wait 15 minutes before you add any thinner if you need to add thinner before you apply the material. It just allows that coating to get homogeneous and be ready to go to be applied in the car. So, yeah, there's There's plenty of opportunity for mistakes. I think you just have to be diligent about what you're doing. You have to look at the application instructions that's provided to you by the coating manufacturer and really just do your best to follow those instructions. Take your time and just do it right. That's the key variable.
And this is an important question. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
Oh, boy. Just people, being around people. I've been fortunate enough to learn a lot from a lot of good people, and I try to impart that to others. It seems like, the work environment is different today than in my day when I was in the shop. I think it's really just trying to impart the knowledge that I've been fortunate enough to gain from either myself and studying and things like that, or learning from other people, just trying to help the next person so that they can do their job as well as they can.
Very good. And we talked about starting out and how we started out. And so can you see this, Tim, on our camera?
Oh, yeah, sure do.
Okay, so anybody watching right now on the video, this is my first hard hat ever in the industry, and I started out as a teen. So this was the Rescar hard hat, my very first one. We had PPE. We could come up with different sayings for our PPE. You could actually win. You remember that? You could actually win a contest by coming up with the PPE sayings.
Absolutely.
For the stickers, yeah. So I've got all that. Some of my original customers, like Shell. This was out in, this was when I was in Maryland. So this would have been Shell, probably in New Jersey, and Star Enterprises and DuPont. DuPont was a big one for us. I'm sure you remember out there. Sure. And in fact, I saw this last night when I was grabbing this thing to bring it in. I still have the original alarm code sticker on the inside for DuPont. So this, in other words, when all hell breaks loose, take off your hard hat and look and see what the alarm bells mean. I'm running regardless. So I'll look at this later. I'm hauling ass to get somewhere safe. But no, I just thought it was, I keep this in my office to remind me where I came from. You know what I mean? And and again, this goes back to Joe Sr. Thank you, Joe Sr., for the opportunity that you've given me that led to all this. And so, but yeah, I still got it. Still got it. Do you keep anything like that?
I have certainly some Rescar memorabilia that I keep. I'm very fond of it. I'm very fond of that time. As I said, I learned a lot there.
Yeah.
And thanks to a lot of people that I worked for and worked with, no doubt about it, I wouldn't be where I am today without that time. So I'm very thankful for that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk.
Very grateful.
For sure. Well, let's talk about PPG now. So what new and exciting things are happening at PPG? Any exciting products coming out that we don't know about yet?
Yeah, so we earlier this year, we launched a new solvent-free DTM exterior epoxy. It's our Amercoat 1202. We've got a few customers that are using it, and we're getting that launched to the rest of the industry. It does require pull component equipment to apply it, so any shops that have that capability, we'll definitely get it out there and help them apply that material. We also changed one of our PPG E202 is our solvent-based DTM exterior epoxy. We made a new version. It's going to be called Amercoat 202LH. So it's a low HAPS version of the standard version. It's just more environmentally friendly. Same application and performance characteristics, just the better for the environment type of material. So those are the two things. We had one of our products last year get FDA approval. So lots of good things going on right now.
Sounds like it. And do you have any training classes coming up? Because you recently had a training class here in Houston for corrosion, and I apologize for missing that. I had a scheduling conflict, but is there anything else like that coming up in the near future?
We did have our rail corrosion school there in Houston. I think it was early May. That was the first one that we had since COVID. So we're definitely looking at when we can have more of those. We're debating whether we have one or two a year. Most likely, probably Houston area. It's probably a really good area to have one. Maybe Chicago, Midwest, something like that. But we're still working through all those details to figure out, do we want to do one, do we want to do two, and where do we want to have them? So I hope that we do have them annually at least. So we have that. We obviously have the upcoming industry events like NEARS and SWARS and tank car meetings, October in the Dallas area. So we'll be out there and about with all the customers and be present for anybody. If they have any questions, feel free to come up to us, and we'd be happy to help.
For sure. And Surace is here in Houston. Southwest Association Rail Shippers Conference is here in Houston, coming up October 2nd and 3rd, I believe it is. I believe it's the first week in October. So anyone that's going to be there, feel free to say hi to Tim and I while you're there. I'm sure we'd be glad to talk to you. Believe it or not, it's nearing the end of our episode already. An hour has flown by talking with you, my friend. So what else would you like to share with our audience before we go today?
To your earlier point, I think this is part of the industry that gets overlooked, maybe undervalued. It's a very tough task, whether you're talking about the blaster or the painter. The painter is spraying, depending on the coating, maybe 5 to 7 mils of coating inside a car, or maybe 12 to 16 mils. And that's basically thousandths. So you're talking 5 to 7 thousandths of an inch of coating, or 12 to 16 thousandths of an inch of coating inside of a 3,000 square foot vessel. So they're very skilled at what they do. I hope that maybe we can get this changed to where it's not an underappreciated or undervalued part of the industry, for sure.
And not only is it 3,000 square foot vessel, but it has no lighting in it.
That's right.
So you're doing these things, blasting and painting literally in the dark, other than what lighting you can provide that's intrinsically safe. So yeah, it's not an easy job at all. At all. Well, would you like to join us again, my friend, on a future episode?
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you having me for this one. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for making it available to me.
My pleasure. We're glad to have you, and we'd love to have you again. And I will see you at Surace here in the next month already. It's coming up pretty soon. So
yeah, sounds good.
Looking forward to it. So thank you, Tim. And I want to go into now my 2 cents. So having the proper lining and coating is vital, not only to ensure the integrity and longevity of the rail car itself, but also the purity of the product it's carrying as well, which is very important. Applying the paint and lining isn't as easy as it looks, as we just talked about. And there are a lot of steps to be taken, as well as the proper training and equipment needed, not to mention the employees to do the work, who are often working in challenging conditions and pressed to make production deadlines. So everyone involved in the process, I salute you. And that's my 2 cents. So speaking of saluting, again, we are doing our second annual Honor Our Heroes Award nominations, our second annual Honor Our Heroes Award, of which nominations are underway. So please nominate your favorite U.S. Armed Forces veteran in the rail industry for a free, again, it's free to you as the nominating person, and it's free to them, free Honor Our Heroes gift package sponsored by our friends at Boots for Troops here in Tomball, Texas. And thank you for them for, again, participating with us this year for our second year. If you'd like to nominate someone, you can do so simply by emailing Boots for Troops at info@boots4troops.com. Again, info@boots4troops.com. Be sure to put in the subject line the American Railroading Podcast, Honor Our Heroes nominee, and then we'll need some information from you. Again, just to reiterate from earlier, you need to provide their name, their contact information, their branch of military, their rank, years served, medals and awards, their rail-related job. Again, it does not have to be a railroad, just related to the industry, the company they worked for or are retired from, and then tell us why you feel they should be the nominee to win the award. And again, I love those paragraphs, so please tell us as much as you would like about how wonderful you think that person is and why they deserve the award. We love that. All nominations must be submitted by September 13th. Yes, that is a Friday. Don't worry, there won't be any black cats involved or anything goofy like that. Which I forget which horror movie that the character was, but it scares me. So submit everything by Friday, September 13th. And we'll be announcing the winner during our September 2024 podcast episode. I want to again take a moment and thank our platinum sponsor, the Alden Company. Founded in 1904, Alden has been an industry leader, charting a steady course in the manufacturing and distribution of a wide variety of railroad safety and track repair tools and more. The Alden website boasts over 800 catalog items to choose from, with categories including track maintenance and repair, derailers and railers, signs and lights, wheel chocks and stops, rail cars and locomotives, and even truck docks. Alden provides outstanding customer service with a wide variety of solutions, and when you call them, you will always get a real person to talk to, not an automated service. While based in the Chicagoland area, the Alden name is known internationally, and with over 120 years in the rail industry, they're a company you can count on. Please reach out to our friends at Alden today at 847-623-8800 or e-rail@aldenco.com. You can also review all of their products and resources on their website at www.aldenco.com. Alden, keeping things on track since 1904. I'd also like to recognize our anchor sponsor, the Revolution Rail Group. Again, we are a consulting and brokering firm in the railcar industry. So if you're needing any kind of consulting whatsoever, we don't turn things down. If we can't help you, we'll find somebody that will. But primarily process flow analysis, market analysis, things of that nature, things that we can help you with, you can reach out to us today. We can also help you with brokering, buying, selling, leasing, and subleasing of rail cars. You can call us today at 844-455-3434 or info@therevolutionrailgroup.com. You can also check out our full suite of services at our website at therevolutionrailgroup.com. Our next episode is coming soon here in September, so stay tuned. It's going to be one you're going to love. I know it is. With that, I say God bless. Make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the American Railroading Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover on a future episode or want to support or sponsor the show, please visit our website at AmericanRailroading.net.